It is March 30, 2025, and I just posted some information on my Facebook, I guess yesterday, about a forensic audit that the city council had commissioned back in 2021, and it was never completed. And the background is the corruption scandal that the city has been going through. After that came to light, the city council wanted a forensic audit to look at all the economic development projects that were carried out by the city, where the city, actually voted on something for the 2-year period, like January 2018 to December 2020. So that's 18, 19, that's 3 years. And the city contracted with a big-time audit firm out of Chicago named Crowe. And Crowe issued a report in December of 22, but it was a draft report, and the city said they weren't satisfied with it, and they were going to continue to work with the audit firm, but nothing's ever been issued. And the point of the audit was to determine whether any of these other projects, there were 227 of them, whether any of them were subject to corruption like the ones involving Denard, Pastor, and Sittenfeld. The city council wanted some assurance that those economic development projects weren't subject to corruption as well. It seems like a good move. In fact, they did that before they got the recommendations from a group called the Economic Development Reform Panel that the city had commissioned. I guess, I'm not sure exactly when it was started, but it issued its report in July of 2021. And after I saw this document, it was encouraging that at least somebody in the city back then had the sense to put a panel like this together to look into exactly what happened with these corruption prosecutions. Because I hadn't really seen much in terms of all this. Very little discussion of the corruption scandal. So I came across this document because I was looking into lobbyists and how the city treats lobbyists. And I started wondering, well, there was a big lobbyist prosecution in Washington, D.C. back in the early 2000s, I think, Abramoff scandal. And then that was all lobbyists. And then the First Energy or Energy First, whatever it was, the big Republican scandal in Columbus, that involved lobbyists. So I started to wonder whether any of these prosecutions here in Cincinnati involved lobbyists. And as far as I can tell, the answer is no. They were basically all developers, except one interesting thing is that in Mr. Sittenfeld's trial, one of the witnesses for the prosecution was a lobbyist who must have testified something to the effect that he warned Sittenfeld that these undercover developers, these undercover FBI agents who were posing as developers, were a couple of clowns, and he shouldn't be doing business with them because he saw right through them. And interestingly enough, that same person is now heading up the Hamilton County Growth Alliance, which is looking for a new arena. Man, what a small town we have here. So anyway, the Economic Development Reform Panel included on one of their recommendations that the city should carry through with this forensic audit and make it public as soon as possible, they said. Well, in December of 22, this audit firm from Chicago, Crowe, issued a draft report, and the city wasn't happy with it for some reason. And the Inquirer wrote all this up. And the response from the city is that the city manager, Cheryl Long, wound up sending a memo apparently to the mayor and the city council saying that they did not find the audit satisfactory. Well, why wasn't it satisfactory? We're not sure. I think everybody was reading that to mean that it wasn't tough enough. Well, I think it's the other way around. I think it was not satisfactory because it was criticizing the current administration and the way the council was doing things. In particular, two items in particular, and both of them are current and topical today. One is this abuse of emergency ordinance process. This auditor pointed this out, that I should probably read it. It said that reduce the frequency that council suspends the 3 readings requirement to allow for as much public engagement as possible. It said add specific language in an ordinance or in the documentation supporting an ordinance that would allow the public to fully understand why the 3 readings requirement was waived, whether by emergency ordinance or outright by council's affirmative vote. The city should include any potential financial, contractual, or reputational risk that could arise if the ordinance is not passed immediately during council's first reading. Well, there's no way this city council is going to limit their ability to pass things by emergency ordinance. I haven't done the analysis yet, but we've talked about it, which is let's find out how many ordinances enacted by the city are enacted under an emergency process. And it's got to be up in the 90% percentile. But the reason for that is because they don't want anybody raising questions about what they're doing. They don't want to give them time to do that. Boom, it's done. On to the next. The other one, which came up in my conversation or discussion about clientelism a few episodes ago, it says document council's involvement in selecting vendors during line item discretionary appropriations, leverage support our line item appropriations, establish additional safeguards to limit council's ability to attach money to specific firms without providing sufficient justification over vendor selection. And that is exactly what goes on with leverage support. Both the mayor and the city council, they can throw money on different line items, and there's no explanation as to how that process works. So I'm sure the city did not like that recommendations or those recommendations. But anyway, they claim that they're not satisfied with this, but they don't explain why. And that was 2 years ago. That was December of 22. They included in their statement that the statement they made to the Inquirer, they said that we will continue to work with Crowe LLP to ensure a comprehensive review, even if that requires more work, before a final draft is submitted to council, Long wrote in the memo. Well, I've been involved in some long investigations that took a long time, but it's been over 2 years and we hear nothing about it. My guess is that this engagement is closed out. I don't think that this engagement is going on anymore. I believe that if we were to contact Crowe and asked them, are you folks still working on something for Cincinnati? They would be able to produce some document basically closing out the engagement. I'm going to ask both Crowe and the city if that's the case, and maybe if that is the case, we can get some understanding of why they did not want to conduct a forensic audit. The point of the Inquirer article is that the city council called for a forensic audit. This economic development reform panel thought that was a good idea. Where's the forensic audit? And inside Crowe's report, it said that they had conversations with somebody in the administration, and it switched from a forensic audit to a assessment. And there's even a footnote on page 2 of the draft report. It says, after discussion with the city, Crowe's performance under this ordinance is an assessment under AICPA's consulting standards and is not a forensic audit. And then they repeat that back in the report. So they thought they were going to be doing a forensic audit, but that's not what the final direction was from the city. So what's the difference? What's the difference between a forensic audit and an assessment? Well, just listen to the words. I mean, forensics versus assessments, they're totally different. They're totally different animals. Forensic audits are actually kind of the auditor's word for investigation. That instead of just looking to see whether the books balance, which would be what most people think about when they think about an audit, it's more than just looking at whether or not the books balance or whether the checking book balances out. These audits would go and look behind transactions and would not be satisfied unless they completely satisfied themselves that there were no questions about these transactions. And in order to satisfy themselves, they would go out and they would interview people, or they would look at third-party records and things like that. A lot of audits, they may have a few steps that do work like that, but that's not the main thrust of most audits. But in a forensic audit, you would. And in terms of an assessment, so by changing from a forensic audit to an assessment, they went from generally accepted accounting standards to the standards set by the association, or the AICPA, Association of Independent Certified Public Accountants, I believe, something like that. Anyway, they're the CPA standards and not the government audit standards. So lower standards, lower levels of proof, lower scope. It's absolutely less intrusive, and you're really not looking for an investigation. You're looking for an assessment. So that's what Crowe did. And even then, they made these recommendations that I'm sure the city does not like. So, but we really need to get to the bottom of it. We need to get to the bottom of why this forensic audit was never completed. And the best thing that could come of this is that we make inquiries and we find out, oh yeah, well, we're still working on it. We're looking into development project number 215, and we'll be done in a few more weeks. But I don't think that's going to happen. But we will find out, and if I'm able to find out, I will let you know.